Hello. Hello. Thank you for joining. Hopefully, okay, my signal I think got a little bit better. Do I sound okay? Do I look okay? Hopefully, I mean, is my picture okay? Of course, I look okay. Just kidding. Let me know if everything sounds okay and looks okay. I'm here now. All right. I'll let people enter. You're good. Okay, thank you. I'm just going to do one thing. Hello. There I feel like lately there's so much news, it's actually hard to even figure out what to talk about. There's about 1,025 things you could talk about. I'll let people see if anyone else joins. Hi, Tim. Hi, Miles. Hi, Meadow Wolf. Thanks for joining. Uh, I'll get started here at the 2-minute mark. Okay, where should I know. Hello. I have some interesting news out of San Francisco. Hi, Darren. Thank you for joining. All right, so I'm going to get into the border. I have some really interesting videos and a lot of really cool information for you. Well, it's not cool information, but you know what I'm saying. Lots to talk about. So the meat of everything will be the border if you want to stick around for that. But I have a lot of smaller stories to go over first because there's just so much, and I have to start with uh Brandon Johnson. So Brandon Johnson is the mayor elect of Chicago. So I'll talk about Brandon Johnson, Alec Baldwin, reparations in San Francisco, this new rule that the Biden administration is passing about regarding credit and home buying. And it was just passed today to a bill was passed today to ban biological men and women's sports. So we'll look about at that in a little bit. Brandon Johnson. Okay, so that's who we'll start with first. He's the mayor elect of San Francisco. He hasn't been sworn in yet, I don't believe. And what has been happening in or not San Francisco? Oh my gosh, Chicago. He is the mayor. He is the mayor elect in Chicago. He's going to be taking after. He's going to be taking over after Lori Lightfoot. And it was hilarious because Lori Lightfoot actually lost out in her primary. And we were all thinking, wow, the people of Chicago have really woken up. They are tired of her soft on crime policies, her demonizing police, and not allowing police to do their jobs. You see businesses shutting down in Chicago like crazy. They're losing essentially half of their Walmarts. 4 Walmarts are shutting down in Chicago and they're citing its profitability. Apparently, some of these Walmarts opened up 17 years ago and haven't turned a profit since. And when you look at the videos that come out of the looting and everything that's happening, it's clear that businesses are not making money and are experiencing looting and shoplifting. So they're eventually going to pull out. One area that I believe was at around, you'll have to check me on this, but I believe it was around 30% vacancy was the same area. So you saw the story of it was around 300 teenagers gathered in downtown Chicago, and it's I believe it's the Magnificent Mile area. Well, that's the same area that a lot of stores are also shutting down. We don't have their reasons, but we can guess. They gathered in that area and it essentially looked like a riot. They were jumping on top of cars. There was a woman and her boyfriend that were stopped at a stoplight and they pulled him out and beat him up, surrounded the car. They just happened upon the situation. There was, I'm sure you saw it went viral, a video of another young woman and her boyfriend, and the story came out. They were actually on Fox News. They were just going out to dinner and walking around doing some shopping, and they were just surrounded by a mob of teenagers that beat the boyfriend, um, pushed the girl to the ground and completely robbed them. Everything that they bought had been taken, their cell phones taken, things like that. So this was a pretty scary and violent situation. It was clearly out of hand. Oh, and not to mention, two of them got shot. A 16-year-old and a 17-year-old were shot. So here is, and we got the same run of the mill from Lori Lightfoot, the same how dare you, criticize my city. Ah. And just this is the mayor elect. This is Eric Johnson in Chicago talking about the whole ordeal, and this was his biggest concern. So you can see this is who the people of Chicago voted in.
It's wrong.
Let me start from the beginning. Yeah, this is here. So this is going to be the new mayor of Chicago.
Look, demonizing children is wrong. We have to keep them safe as well. Have you ever taught middle school? I have. Have you ever raised young people? Do you understand the risk that young people take just because they're young? Do you know that home plate is at the bottom of my stairs? I found that out when my son was sliding down those stairs trying to score. They're young. Sometimes they make silly decisions. They do. And so we have to make sure that we are investing to make sure that young people know that they are supported.
So he's one of the ones, he talks about the root causes. And you see how he talks about, first of all, I do want to make it clear, nobody's demonizing the teenagers. They're demonizing the criminal behavior. That's what's being demonized, the violent criminal behavior. No one is demonizing teenagers that just want to have fun. And since when did mischief, just regular kids engaging in mischief, become gunshots, robbing people, jumping on top of cars? I don't know about you, but I feel like when I was a teenager, mischief was like toilet papering someone's house. Did anyone have the night of mischief? I had a really good friend that grew up in New Jersey, and it was the night before Halloween, and they called it the night of mischief. And all the kids would go out and egg things in toilet paper houses. That's mischief, and that is even borderline. Should have floored it. Well, then you know what happens if you try and get out of there. If you accidentally injure someone, you're the one that was aggressive toward the peaceful protester. That's how that usually goes down. So people are afraid probably to even defend themselves. Chicago, New York, Detroit, and other dim places have always been soft on crime, except when a Republican is in charge. Born on mischief, not in New Jersey. But I wouldn't equate that to normal mischief. And you can just see the way this guy talks. It's actually pretty, even for the most progressive of Democrats, it's pretty surprising that this individual even got votes. Just from how I don't see a leader anywhere in this, even if I don't agree with what he's saying. Egg houses. Oh, how I remember that back in the day. That or driving around and getting mooned. Yeah, mooning each other. That was teenage mischief. I just wanted to, you didn't meet it now. This is Brandon Johnson, the mayor-elect in Chicago. Lovely. I wanted to, so Alec Baldwin, we've talked about Alec Baldwin on here when all this was going on before, but I found this really interesting. So Alec Baldwin was involved in the fatal shooting of Helena Hutchins while they were filming their movie Rust. He was rehearsing with the gun. It fired and fatally shot Helena, and I believe it was the assistant director or the director, I believe. I don't recall his name. And there was an investigation into it, and the investigation found that there was criminal negligence. And if you actually look at the movie protocols, if you look at the SAG protocols, which the film was under the Screen Actors Guild, that's a union that protects cast and crew on films. If you look at their guidelines regarding firearms, what was described as to have happened in the Alec Baldwin shooting clearly violates those guidelines. You're not supposed to be pointing the weapon at anyone, and at all times, you treat everything as if it is loaded with actual bullets, not to mention the mismanagement of everything else. Well, anyway, it appeared to me to be negligent, and to most people, but the charges were dropped. And I haven't actually read this yet, so I don't know why they were dropped. But the criminal charges against actor Alec Baldwin in the fatal on-set shooting of the movie Rust have been dropped. ABC News reported that both counts of involuntary manslaughter, okay, that's what he was facing. Both counts of involuntary manslaughter facing Baldwin for the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins are in the process of being dropped by recently appointed special prosecutors Carrie Morrissey and Jason Lewis. We are pleased with the decision to dismiss the case against Alec Baldwin, and we encourage a proper investigation into the facts and circumstances of this tragic accident. Luke Nickas, I think I said that correctly, and Alex Spiro, the attorneys for Alec Baldwin, said in a statement. Deadline reported that the investigation into Hutchins' death is still ongoing and that this case could be resurrected in the future. I mean, this seems a little sus. The Santa Fe County District Attorney's Office dropped the gun enhancement charge against Baldwin in February, so they already dropped that enhancement in February because prosecutors would have to prove that he brandished the firearm with intent to harm or intimidate a person. In order to avoid further litigious distractions by Mr. Baldwin and his attorneys, the district attorney and the special prosecutor have removed the firearm enhancement to the involuntary manslaughter charges in the death of Helena Hutchins on the Rust set film. The prosecution's priority is securing justice, not securing billable hours for big city attorneys. The charges against Baldwin came after the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office turned over a 500-page report on its investigation to prosecutors in October. The report contains redactions, but the investigation found that Baldwin fired a gun with live ammunition. The report also paints a chaotic picture of what happened the day of the shooting, as well as documented repeated problems with firearms on set. A report signed by the New Mexico chief medical investigator found Hutchins' death to be an accident. Review of available law enforcement reports show no compelling demonstration that the firearm was intentionally loaded. I don't think nobody said that it was intentional, but I think to a lot of people, with what we know so far, it appears to be reckless endangerment, manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter. That enhancement law was passed after he committed the crime. It is really interesting. And it also seemed like I was paying attention to the district attorney during this time, and it seemed like the district attorney was pretty adamant on finding justice. So it's interesting that they were dropped. But that's where it is right now. Okay, so Hannah Gutierrez Reed, she was the armorer on the set. She was also charged with involuntary manslaughter. I wonder if her charges were dropped as well. Armor. Let me see if hers were charged. Okay, charges were dropped against her as well. Interesting. All right. So there's that. In New Mexico, laws can't be both a special prosecutor and a legislator. Oh, lawyers can't be. Is that what you said? Yeah, I was talking about Baldwin. So all the charges were just dropped. The criminal charges were dropped. There were 2 charges of involuntary manslaughter that he was facing, and both were charged. The charges against, or the charge against the armorer on the set, that young girl Hannah, were also charged, or charged, dropped. Can't talk today. Interesting. All right, let's move along to San Francisco. San Francisco. That's I was getting confused earlier calling Chicago San Francisco because I had been talking about San Francisco a lot recently. Well, I don't know if you remember, but San Francisco, yeah, I'm going to have to boycott that movie like all San Fran, Poop City. Well, San Francisco has been in the news a lot lately because, yes, they do have a poop patrol. They have a serious open air drug issue, a serious homelessness issue. The city actually, in and of itself, is facing the citywide budget is facing about an $800 million deficit, and they are expecting to have a huge real estate turnover because they're experiencing record vacancies in downtown. And some of that too is because San Francisco is very tech, and a lot of those companies that had office buildings downtown started working remotely, so there's not as many people in the city, which actually is bad for businesses as well. So when you put all of those things together, it's not good. Well, anywho, there was a group of individuals and a group of politicians who thought it would be a great idea amidst all of these things to start a reparations committee. They actually did some research and came out with a reparations plan. And that plan was to give all eligible Black residents a $5 million payout. They would have a salary of $100,000 per year. What else was it? Oh, they would be able to buy a home. They would be able to purchase a home for $1. And that was just a few of the more outlandish demands in this reparations plan. To make it even crazier, this group of people proposed they requested $50 million of taxpayer money, and that wasn't to start the reparations payouts. That was just to employ a reparations committee so that they could come up with a plan. Well, just a few days ago, Mayor London Breed, so London Breed, she's the mayor of San Francisco, she publicly stated her displeasure with this whole idea, and the fact she publicly stated that she does not support it at all. Well, she has released a cease and desist letter today, and I thought I would read it to you. I find it really interesting. So here it is. San Francisco Mayor London Breed added cease and desist today regarding unlawful and wasteful use of taxpayer funds on the San Francisco plan for reparations. And oh, where is my phone? I apologize, but I'm going to have to read this on my phone because the text is too small for me to read it on the computer, but the language in this. All right, here's some of it. I won't read the whole thing. Dear Honorable Madam Mayor, so this is the cease and desist. As a longtime resident and taxpayer of the city and county of San Francisco, I am writing to demand that you immediately cease all publicly funded work on consideration of. Actually, I apologize. Let me correct. This has been added to London Breed not supporting this and publicly saying that she is not in support of this. But here's the letter. As a longtime resident and taxpayer of the city and county of San Francisco, I am writing to demand that you immediately cease all publicly funded work on consideration of the draft San Francisco reparations plan and desist from any future taxpayer monies and expenditures for or relating to the moreover an appropriation of $50 million. So this is specifically saying that this violates several constitutional provisions. More specifically and obviously, it is the clause of the 14th Amendment that says that you cannot discriminate based on race. And essentially, what the reparations plan would be doing is discriminating taxpayer monies based on eligible Black residents. So anyone who is not Black is automatically not eligible. That is against the Constitution. It's unconstitutional. Yes, but you cannot discriminate taxpayer money on race. So there's that. And then you have the whole thing of identity. Can I just identify? All right, one more thing, and then finally we can get to the border. So, this, I don't know if you all heard about this. This is interesting. So, there is going to be a new rule that is starting on May 1st, and it is essentially going to be expanding home access to high risk buyers. And if that sounds familiar, and if that is creating some kind of reaction within yourself, that is pretty familiar. That's essentially what they did in the early 2000s that caused the housing crisis. And basically, what they did is they expanded access to home loans to buyers that typically wouldn't have that, to high risk buyers. So they made it much easier for high risk individuals to purchase a home. That caused a huge bubble. And then that bubble burst as people were not able to pay their mortgages, and there were a lot of foreclosures. But this one actually goes even beyond that, and it's taking away from people with good credit to subsidize some of those fees for people with bad credit. That's not what I wanted. We're loading here. All right. So starting May 1st, a new federal rule will force homebuyers with good credit scores to pay higher mortgage rates and fees to subsidize those with riskier credit ratings who are also buying homes. The Federal Housing Finance Agency's push for affordable housing has led to the introduction of loan level price adjustments. So essentially what it's doing is if your credit score is over 680, you will pay around $40 more per month on a $400,000 home loan. Buyers who make down payments of 15 to 20% will face the largest fees. The new fees will only apply to Americans buying houses or refinancing after May 1st. So it's essentially just it's essentially redistributing wealth. It's lowering the fees for the risky bad credit home buyers, and it's taking that fee and it's just putting it on top of added fees for someone with better credit. Now this won't affect everyone with really good credit, but it will affect a lot of people. And that's essentially what it is. It's a redistribution of wealth, and it's expanding access to risky buyers. And it so it's obviously bad for several reasons. And what's pretty wild about this is Biden was in the government and essentially like oversaw and was a part of the housing crisis and what caused the housing crisis. So you would think that this administration would know better. Then again, I don't think Joe Biden knows of much of anything that's going on ever. Cool, it's a major incentive to ruin my great credit. And the reason you have higher fees on someone with lower credit is because you are a risk to whoever is giving you that loan. And you screwed up your credit. It wasn't because you didn't have money. You screwed up your credit because you weren't paying for what you already owed. You overspent somewhere. If you have bad credit, that doesn't mean that you are low income. That means that you don't know how to manage your money. So it would make sense that you have more fees when you're asking for a loan. And what you do when you have bad credit is you don't go out and buy homes. You stay put, you work hard to fix your credit. And then the people that did, that's why you have lower fees. You're rewarded for paying all your stuff on time and to contributing to a functioning society. In his Alzheimer's, he's reliving all his bad decisions. I think he is. It's so funny. Oh, since we're talking about Biden, before we segue into the border, um, but I'll be interesting to see because this is getting a lot of attention today. So, will it be a thing? I don't know. But they had to fix what they did in 2008, and they're doing it at a really interesting time too when the price of housing is already just super high. So, I could see this being an awesome disaster. And you know what it reminds me of? A lot of these policies where instead of just, okay, so if their incentive was solely just to give access to more people, which I don't agree with, we know how that story ends. But if that was their incentive to help, lower income people be able to buy a home and maintain a home, be able to bridge that wealth gap, which first of all, I don't agree with that tactic in order to do that. But if that's your main goal, why not just lower? But they don't do that. It's always we need to take away from someone else to subsidize. It reminds me of the whole tax the rich scenario. That in my mind is just a distraction. The tax the rich is to look at rich people with contempt instead of looking at why the government needs to raise taxes on anyone and how they're mismanaging our money. It's let's demonize the rich people, not the people that are mismanaging all of your tax dollars. Anywho, there you go. Want to make houses more attainable? Abolish property taxes. There you go. But no, thank you for saying that. That's such a good point because they won't do that because they don't they don't want to lower taxes. They don't want to stop their outrageous spending and all their little pet projects. They don't want to do that. They would rather take from other people so they can continue just mismanaging everyone's money. And it's so funny too because I do see a lot of people. They're like the some people framed it as this is slipping into communism. And I get the argument how that's hyperbolic, but is it not? Like, slowly. Things don't just happen overnight. It's slower and slower and slower. Anywho, here's uh here's a little segue. Since we're talking about someone not remembering, was this yesterday? I think this was Biden yesterday or the day before, where he was essentially signing an executive order to expand healthcare. And here we go. It's a short clip. I might have to turn it up a little. Slipping, we are in the 10th level of communism. Okay, here's Biden on his way to sign that executive order.
I'm going to go over and sign that executive order. Thank you.
Eh? We have to watch it again. Oh my goodness. Curtis, thank you so much for that super chat. Thank you. That's how it happens. It's always a slow creep into communism. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It sure is. And that's what I've realized too. Like a lot of these things, a lot of the things that are eroding our culture, they've been happening for a really long time, but it's like a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here. And before you know it, we're Russia. I almost said North Korea, but North Korea is technically not communist. Is that right? And Brandon. Okay, one more time.
I'm going to go over and sign that executive order. Thank you.
That's nice. Okay. Let's talk about this border. So it's pretty much imploding. This was the cover of the New York Post. Biden lied. And now even Eric Adams of New York City, who would not call out Biden, he refused to call out the Biden administration. If you remember, so New York City started getting thousands of migrants because Greg Abbott in Texas was getting overrun with people coming into his state. He had been asking the Biden administration since the very beginning for help and had been completely ignored. So his plan was, I'm going to start busing migrants to sanctuary cities, sanctuary jurisdictions, because why would you not do that? Texas does not vote for open borders, yet they are right on the border and they get the brunt of open borders, but they don't vote that way. So why should they have to deal with policies that people that don't agree with them are pushing? So I fully supported that idea. I thought it was a great idea. And it's forcing some of the biggest proponents of sanctuary cities, some of the biggest back scratchers of the Biden administration to come out and condemn this. And that's exactly what's happening with Eric Adams right now. And it took Eric Adams a long time to do this. So let me read just a little bit of this article. Eric Adams blasted President Biden on Wednesday, saying the White House had turned its back on the Big Apple and left the city to handle the arrival of thousands of migrants on its own. A situation his owner said, who is his owner? It didn't even tell me who that was. Said had triggered one of the largest humanitarian crises that this city has ever experienced. That is a big statement. So this migrant crisis in New York, they're saying, is one of the largest humanitarian crises that has ever hit the city. The national government has turned its back on New York City, and Adams is blaming a projected $4.2 billion budget shortfall on the Fed's inaction. Every service in this city is going to be impacted by asylum seekers. Every single service. So that's services to elderly, disabled, veterans, the homeless, people that are already on welfare, the public school system, hospitals, the public hospitals. I would advise you in New York City, do not go to a public hospital. All of those things are going to be impacted, and they're having to cut funding for every single service. The national government has turned, I read that. This is in the lap of the President of the United States. The President of the United States can give us the ability to allow people to work. This is the lap of the executive branch of the United States of America, the mayor added, claiming that most migrants had come to New York to work and support themselves, but are prohibited from doing so for the first 6 months of their stay. Okay. I need to come back to that because I'm going to tell you what they're going to start to do. More than 55,000 foreigners claiming to be seeking refuge from the persecution and violence have arrived in New York City over the past year. Some 200 asylum seekers arrive in New York City every single day, and it costs $380 per day per household to provide them with food and shelter. Most of the migrants, about 34,000 of them, are being put up in taxpayer funded emergency shelters, mostly hotels, with thousands more dropped off at 8 humanitarian emergency response and relief centers. Over 50,000 people have come to the city of New York seeking assistance, we are told. You will not allow them to work. You give them food, clothing if they need, you give them basic services if they need. You're supposed to make sure they have 3 meals a day, make sure that all the children are educated. And while you're doing that, New York City, we're not going to give you anything in return. Okay, see, this is very bothersome, and I want you to see what he's doing with this argument. He's not arguing that they are removed. He's not saying that the border needs to be closed. He's not saying that we need to vet people more. He's saying that we want to get them work permits. And what you need to know about the people in New York City, so their ICE offices in New York City are completely overrun right now. Some of these migrants that are seeking asylum that are arriving in New York City they don't have appointments to have their cases adjudicated for about 10 years because the system is so backed up. So they will be here for 10 years and we won't even know if they have a legitimate asylum claim or not. And we do know the numbers. We do know that 90%, around 90%, give or take a few, of people, I would actually argue it's probably higher than that, but I'll be conservative. About 90% of people that claim asylum at our border, they do not have legitimate asylum claims. So what you have right now, you have all these people in the country, most of whom do not have legitimate asylum claims. Because our border is open, because our ICE offices and our judges are so backed up, they will be here for years before we know if they have a legitimate asylum claim. And instead of asking for enforcement, Mayor Eric Adams is asking that they can be able to work. And what's going to happen, I'm going to tell you right now. And I've already seen it happening in other places popping up. Like we just said it starts a little bit here, a little bit there, and a little bit here. What they're going to do is they're going to argue for these individuals to get work permits. And then they're going to argue for them to get voting rights. And then they will be voting. You have 4.2 million people that we already know about who have entered the country. Excuse me. No, back that up. 5 million. And they're here. And we don't know if they have legitimate claims or not. Thousands of people are waiting to come across the border and potentially come to New York City. So 52,000 can jump to 100,000 if we don't get this under control. It does this great city a disservice, and we're calling on the Biden-Harris administration, the United States Department of Homeland Security. They must use all the tools that are available to resolve this issue. Okay, so at least he's going into enforcement a little bit, but you see what he's really doing. And he's doing this because the wealthy are fleeing New York City, so they lost a lot of their income tax base. They need taxpayers. He needs those people to work. He needs people to make tax revenue for his city. Because not only do you have all these people arriving that are eating up all of these services and that are not contributing into the system, they're losing 50% of their income tax base. Well, they're not losing 50%, but their wealthy pay about 50% of their income tax base. So he's probably pretty desperate. And I'm sure a large amount of those people are people that lived in the cities because that's really where people are fleeing. I'm sure if you live in the rural part of New York City, you were probably less likely to leave. Mayorkas has been, so he's the secretary. Alexander Mayorkas is the Secretary of Homeland Security. So he's essentially in charge of all this. Now, he's had several Senate hearings, congressional hearings where they're questioning him, and he essentially just repeats over and over again that the border is under control. It's under control. And this is essentially what the entire Biden administration is trying to do. They're telling us it's under control. We've got it. They're also saying, and if you read the top of this headline, it says, if your application is denied or you attempt to cross into the United States unlawfully, you will not be allowed to enter. So that was Joe Biden, January 8th of 2023. And that is not true. People are being let in mass. That is absolutely not true. And they're going to continue to tell you the border is closed, everything is under control, and that is not true. They are literally trying to convince you of an alternate reality. But this was yesterday.
Our country.
So he is talking to Mayorkas. You can't see Mayorkas, but that's essentially who he's talking to. They want to impeach Mayorkas, and they keep saying during these hearings that it's all his fault. You need to resign. How dare you? And they're absolutely right. And I have zero respect for Mayorkas. They're absolutely right. But what you also have to understand is he's following orders from the administration. So he's getting orders from above. And yeah, you could say he could resign. He could say, I'm not doing this. He could, but he's not the only bad guy.
Money to hire 1,000 new border agents. Nobody wants to work for you. We're done with your lies to America. It's shameful what you brought upon our country.
And under Mayorkas' leadership at DHS, illegal crossings have reached all-time highs in back-to-back years, with over 5 million total now. More than 1.3 million known gotaways have successfully snuck into the United States without capture. Migrant deaths have set an all-time record with more than 1,400 at the southern.
Yeah, so it's a mess. It's clearly not under control. And there was a Rasmussen poll that they did, and the number one concern of a lot of people. Well, I have a lot of concerns. I have a concern about the how you can't have open borders in a welfare state. There's only so much money to go around, and they also need public education. All the concerns that I told you about. There was a story that came out that we had 133 individuals who are on the terror watch list who were caught at the border. There's over 1 million gotaways, and those are people that they never made contact with a border patrol agent. Those are typically the people that are evading border patrol agents, and they're usually evading them for a reason. So those are the people that we have no idea who they are. So just imagine how many people with criminal histories are in our United States and we have no idea who they are. And think about it like this. It's actually genius. What we have done is we have actually created a sanctuary for criminals around the world to create a new identity and escape their criminal histories. Let's say you caught a murder charge somewhere, you escaped, or you're escaping that charge, you're trying to evade that charge. How genius would it be to, if you have the funds, pay a smuggler, get into the United States, and create a new identity? And I'm going to show you, this is about a 2-minute clip, but it's really, really compelling. This is from the YouTube channel, and I'm going to type his name, Peter Santinello. He did a series on the border, and this is not a political guy, which I almost like it better because he's not political, so he doesn't have a biases here. He has a YouTube channel. He does like travel and journalism type stuff, and he did a series on the border, and what he did was really genius. He had wanted to do a series on the border for a long time, but had a lot of issues because no one would talk. So if you work for Border Patrol, if you work for ICE, if you work for the police, you are not allowed to say anything to the media about that. They're not allowed to talk to the media, and they'll tell you, I'm not allowed to talk to you. But with a sheriff is elected by the people, so he can say whatever he wants. That's why some of my favorite press conferences are by sheriffs, because they'll just tell you like it is. They answer to the people. They're elected by the people. And what Peter did is he went on the border. He went to an Arizona sector and he went to a Texas sector and essentially did ride-alongs with the sheriffs there. And this is some of the footage that he caught. I believe this guy,
Border Patrol had.
I want to say this guy is Arizona sector. I totally forgot, but this is right along our U.S. border, and this shows you, you'll see.
But again, here's the porta johns that we had to do.
Okay, you see they have porta potties along the border, and they have this big covering right here because so many people were coming through. They had to put up porta potties, and a covered area so people weren't sitting out there baking in the sun while they were waiting to be processed by Border Patrol agents.
But again, here's the porta johns that we had to do. Border Patrol had to put up a cover for shade.
So this is for migrants coming in?
Yep. So to give you an idea of the monstrosity that we were dealing with here, this was all covered in trash. Some NGOs have come in and cleaned this up. But what I would find down here is all these identification cards and passports. Mm-hmm. I picked all these up myself.
Just in the dirt out here?
Just on the ground. And we might find some again today. But see, these are individuals that have fled countries of violence, then gone to another country, been allowed to stay there. That's what a lot of these green ones are. They've been allowed to reside in those countries and work and live. But that's not what their original intent was. Their original intent was to get through that country to get to the United States. So they discard their passports.
See what I'm saying? If you want to have a new identity, if you want to escape a murder charge or something really serious, you just hire a smuggler, come across the border, and just discard your ID. And you hear what he said also, a lot of other reasons people discard their IDs is because they've already resettled in other countries and have already lived a perfectly fine and stable and safe life. But their goal is to come to the United States. Their goal wasn't just to go somewhere that was more safe. They want to come here.
Their ID cards, and they portray themselves as somebody different from their original country of violence. So it's a game. So we share all this with HSI. So every one of these have been shared with our federal government. But this is just a small snapshot of what I've picked up down here as far as passports.
If you're from Venezuela, right? Let me try to walk through this, right? You come up through Mexico, right? You want to discard your passport before you come over?
Yeah, because everything's given to you here.
Okay, what happens if you come over with your passport? They're going to say,
well, for some now, they're allowed to stay.
Yeah. And what if you watch the full video, what you'll see after this is the sheriff takes Peter around that little opening of the border wall, and they're walking around in the sand, and they find several IDs. They also find currency. And what I mean by currency from other countries, because clearly that currency isn't good in the US anymore. So they'll find all kinds of currency from all kinds of different countries. And they did find currency. I can't remember what country it was from. Darn it. I don't know. But what's really alarming too is now you're having a lot of Chinese nationals come across the southern border. So they are arriving at Mexico in mass, And an important piece of news that you should know is that we are essentially expecting a tidal wave of people to come across. A lot of people have been waiting in Mexico for Title 42 to end, and it is set to end on May 11th. So we are expecting a lot more people to attempt to come over due to the fact that they know Title 42 is ending. And of those individuals, you do have a lot of Chinese national war-aged men along with everyone else. I think it's around, people are coming from 150 different countries, probably countries that I've never even heard of. Who knows? But there was actually this video that RNC Research put out over about the border, and this will kind of show you the contrast between the messaging. And I see this every single day because I follow a lot of people that are on the border. I also talk to a border patrol agent pretty regularly. I won't tell you where he's based out of, but he talks to me and tells me stuff all the time. And so I'm looking at this every single day, and they are literally trying to create an alternate reality by telling you it's under control. So this video actually was put out today by RNC Research, and it'll play side by side sort of the Instagram versus reality version of how the Democrats are trying to paint the border situation. Pretty interesting. All right. It reminds me of the video that went out in the summer of 2022. It was the same sort of like all the Democrat politicians talking about how the protests were peaceful, and then the video footage of the actuality of the rioting that happened. It's kind of giving me those vibes.
Testimony that the border is secure.
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
We have taken unprecedented action over the past year and a half to secure our border.
And we have a process in place to manage migrants at the border. We're working to make sure it's safe and orderly and humane.
The border is closed.
We agree that the border is secure.
We're executing a comprehensive strategy to secure our borders.
One of our highest priorities is to ensure that we have a secure border, and that is what we are doing.
The border is secure.
Yeah, so the guy saying the border is secure, that's Mayorkas, just in case anyone didn't know who that was. So that's our Secretary of Homeland Security, who is convincing us that the border is closed and secure and under control. You can decide for yourself what you think. Something I also want to add, I touched on it earlier, the human trafficking element of it. So there was, just to give you an idea of this issue, a lot of young girls and kids are actually being brought into our country to be trafficked here. They're being labor trafficked and sex trafficked. Here's an example of this in Polk County, Florida, just a few months ago. Hi, Julius. I'm live again. It hasn't been 6 months of silence since your last video yet. Hi, I'm back. Sorry about that. There was one of the biggest trafficking ring busts ever in Polk County, Florida. It either happened last month or the month before. I don't remember exactly. Curtis, thank you so much. Hold on, I'm going to put you up in just a second. I just wanted to finish this one point. Thank you so much for the super chat. And I'm going to read that in just a moment. I really appreciate that. So the largest sex trafficking ring, there was a bust in Polk County, Florida. They arrested over 100 people and they identified 24 victims. 14 of those victims were were victims that were trafficked over the border since Biden has taken office. So the majority of them have been trafficked over our southern border in the past 6 months, and a few of them had been trafficked over the border 2 weeks prior to this bust. So it's a really big thing that's happening. Thank you again, Curtis. I only live a couple hours from the border in Texas. It's completely out of control. I wish Abbott would exercise his state's right to deploy guard and to defend the sovereign state border of the South. Yeah, this is what I don't understand as well about Abbott. I know that he has certain restrictions, and what I learned actually, there is, you might be able to tell that landscape better than I can. I want to say that they were in Arizona, that sheriff that I just showed you was Arizona, but they have Peter Santinella. If you go on his YouTube channel, he has an entire hour-long show where he followed a Texas sheriff. And again, the Texas sheriff or the sheriffs are fascinating because they'll tell you everything. They'll tell you exactly what they think, exactly how they feel, and exactly what is going on. And I do know that the officers have restrictions, and it is a federal law that a local officer, I don't know about National Guard, but it is actually a federal law that local officers, they are not allowed to arrest people on the sole basis of being in the country illegally. The only people that can do that are ICE. So they cannot arrest and deport people. So I don't know if that accounts for some of this like perceived, because I definitely have it too, some of this perceived inaction of Abbott. Trust me, I have it as well, but I wonder if he just doesn't have the power, or I wonder what the role of the National Guard would be. And what is also happening is there is what I heard is the local National Guard will try and stop people from coming. Border Patrol. Hold on, I want to get this right. Before I do. I completely forgot about this. Okay. Okay, so this is actually from the Texas National Guard. He can declare an invasion and deploy the National Guard, and Texas has its own state guard forces. All right, here's a story about that. The governor has sent waves of troops to the border. So it looks like he did. This is in 2022, February 1st, 2022. The governor has sent waves of troops to the border as guard officials scramble to execute a massive mobilization that would normally take months to plan. Usually, long-term guard deployments come from the federal government with nearly a year's notice. The NCO had several months to settle his affairs before two previous deployments, but Operation Lone Star is different. So they did have that with Operation Lone Star, but I do remember, I feel like there was an issue between National Guard and Border Patrol. I'm gonna have to look into that more because I'm curious now. Thank you very much, Curtis, and thank you for that comment. He can declare an invasion and deploy the National Guard. The troops there say they faced a deluge of problems when they were mobilized, some of which have slowly been improving in recent weeks. As many as 1 in 5 troops. Okay, this isn't telling me what I want. Is Texas using Governor Greg Abbott, the Texas Department of Public Safety? What is the National Guard doing at the border? That's interesting. They should have done so 2 years ago. Well, they had that Operation Lone Star. But clearly that didn't do much. It says federally activated National Guard troops are expected to remain along the U.S. southern border. Well, here's the thing too, and if you listen to what here, I'll play you the very
Snuck
start
into
of
the
this
United
again.
States.
To hire 1,000 new border agents. Nobody wants to work for you.
Here's another thing too. It doesn't matter how many people you have if they're being told to let people in. And that's what I was hearing. I couldn't find a story to confirm this, but I know that I read it somewhere and I had been hearing this, that there are people, but they're essentially opening the gates for people and letting them in and then just processing them. I need to look into that more. I don't want to give you wrong information. But it doesn't matter how many even Border Patrol agents you have if they're being instructed to just do paperwork for people and let them in. Oh, Curtis said, yeah, that was AZ. There's no Rio Grande. Yeah, I should have thought about that. Now I remember the Texas one. That one was really good. That's a really interesting one. I heard Texas recently passed a law about that. They would monitor the border themselves or something. Okay, so they keep trying to make things to bypass that law. So they're trying to give, let's see. I believe they were trying to give homeowners the right to get people for trespassing. Okay, simply violating notice and trespassing on private property. Okay, Texas House bill would give state the power to repel. This is actually recent. This is from March. The Texas Tribune. House Bill 20 by State Representative Matt Schaefer would test the boundaries of the state's ability to enforce immigration law, which courts have historically ruled falls under federal purview. So expelling someone across the border has to be done on the federal level. Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan threw his support behind striking border security bill that would create a state unit of officers empowered to repel and arrest migrants crossing the border outside a port of entry and return migrants to Mexico if they are seen trying to illegally cross the border. And in signal that the upper chamber is also willing to test the bounds of the state's immigration enforcement authority. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who oversees the Senate, announced he is backing Senate legislation that would make it a state crime for people who cross into Texas illegally. The Senate bill proposed by Brian Birdwell would jail a person for a year or 2 years if the person tried to enter the country a second time. The proposal would also punish the person to life in prison if they had been previously convicted of a felony. So that sounds like a good idea, which he can do by state executive order. Yeah, I don't know. That I would like to look into that. That's the problem. He allowed the feds to federalize the National Guard. Oh, interesting. Okay, so Curtis says that's the problem. He allowed the feds to federalize the National Guard. Once that happens, they're under federal control. If he ended the federalization of the National Guard, he would have control. Okay, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Interesting. You know, that is such a good example of, I don't know if you ever heard I don't necessarily, I guess you could call it a conspiracy theory or just speculation. But you know how in 2020, Democrats were really pushing. I mean, obviously, some of them still are. We just looked at Brandon Johnson from Chicago. You know how in 2020, Democrats kept pushing for defund the police. Well, a lot of people were sort of questioning if the motive behind the defund the police was actually to create like a federalized police, to federalize the police so that they would be under federal rule and not local rule. That was, I heard that several times that people were speculating if that was one of the motives behind the whole defund the police movement was to federalize the police. And that is such a good example of why that's a terrible idea to federalize local enforcement of any kind, local support or local enforcement. Interesting. Haha, yeah. Good example of that. And it's wild that a Republican governor would be for federalizing of the national guard. Is there a funding instance? I'm so curious. I don't think the Democrats even want to fix the southern border because if they really wanted to fix it, they could just close down the border and send in the army. Oh, yeah, they could fix it like that. I mean, it wouldn't be fixed like that. There's a lot to be done. But if they just were able to enforce the rules and the laws that are already on the books the way that they're supposed to, we could start moving in the direction of fixing this today. But they're not doing that. And that's the issue too. So what a Democrat talking point that you'll hear a lot, and it's kind of right, but it didn't tell you the whole truth, is that if Republicans wanted to fix the border, then they would approve more money for Border Patrol. Does Border Patrol need more money? Yes. Do we need more Border Patrol officers? Yes. But number one, this guy was right. Nobody wants to do the job. Who wants to work for Mayorkas? You go in wanting to do good things for your country, not to be a travel agent. So that's some of the reasons why some Republicans were not in favor for more funding, because they know where it's going to go. Are you just going to hire more agents to act like travel agents so that you can process even more people into our country at a faster rate? Is that why I want more agents? Is that where funding is going to be going? And that's why nobody wants to be an agent right now. That's why they're not able to find people. Oh, who wants to be an agent right now? You go be a travel agent. Yeah. All right, you all. Well, that was everything I had for you tonight. Thank you for joining. That was fun. And they would have voted for the wall when they had the House and Senate in 17 and 18. Yep. Isn't that how the story typically goes? All the people that complain about, and it happens to Republicans and Democrats, it's like all the people that complain about things when they had control of the House and the Senate, you can usually go back to the time when they had control of both the House and the Senate and they did nothing. All right, you all. Well, have a really good night. Thank you again for joining. That was a fun stream. Hopefully the next one can be lighter topics and not, I mean, you should talk about the border, but it's depressing sometimes. All right. Well, see you all later. Have a really good night. Bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Bye, Dave. Bye, Tim. Chris. Bye, Blitzen. TNN. All right. I'll see you later. Bye.